I showed this demonstration at a talk I gave at WPPI to wedding photographers, and it got such a good reaction I thought I'd use this as my example of one of the real benefits of working with smart objects is this built-in ability, without doing anything differently, of creating what amounts to a template. So all I've done so far is open this raw file as my background, just a close-up of a wedding dress, and I'm going to take this other photo and drag it on, which of course opens Camera Raw, so I can play with it a little bit to get it to look the way that I want. And for our purposes today, I'm going to say that's okay, although I do want to make it a little bit smaller. And I hit OK. And of course, it prepares a smart object and brings it in. And for now, I'm going to do, let's close this, is I'm just going to hit Enter. For now, what I want to do is make a copy of it, not new layer via copy. I want this to be linked together, so I'm just doing a good old duplicate command, Command or Control J, and I'm going to transform this and make it much smaller and put it over here. Once I've done that, now I can come back to this one because I really want to do it on a bit of an angle, something like this. Maybe even go slightly off the page. Like that. There we go. So now I come back to this one, and this point I'm just going to do a quick little Photoshop design effect. I'm going to load this as a selection and transform this selection. Now what I want you to remember as I'm showing you these steps is I want to do this once, because once I'm finished this will end up being a reusable template. So what I'm going to do is on a new layer, I'm going to fill that with black and then drag it below so I have that kind of effect there. I want this to look like a piece of film. I think I'm actually going to make this just a little bit wider, like that. And what I want to do is make the film sprockets, the holes, whatever you call those things in film. I'm going to take my eraser tool and go and get from the set of brushes, there is a set of brushes called square brushes. And for now I'm just going to temporarily pick that and then find the right size. That looks pretty good. I think I might make it just a hair bigger, maybe a little bit bigger, like that. And I want to put these holes all the way down the side. So the way I do that is in my brush options, where I go and make all the choices I want to make. One of the options is spacing. So if I space these out the amount I want, that looks pretty good. Now I just have to change the opacity back to 100, come up here to the top, click once, hold down the Shift key, and click at the bottom, and then it does all my little sprockets for me. Just do the same on the other side. Click once, hold down the Shift key, click again at the bottom, and again it makes all my little sprockets. So now I have holes in my film, which looks very good. Now at this point, again, keep in mind, looks like I'm doing a lot of steps, but I'm really just preparing a layout here. I'm going to hold down the Option key to make a copy, and then Shift once I start dragging to make sure it nicely lines up, and just repeat that a number of times, like this. So I end up with what hopefully is going to end up looking like a series of images on a piece of film. So I'm going to take all of these layers and free transform those and put those on a slight angle as well. Now what's likely going to happen, as has happened here, is I'm going to have to do a quick bit of editing to make it look right, because right now my film strip doesn't quite fit, so I'll just have to free transform this, stretch it up a bit so it goes off the edge of the page, like that. There we go. So now at this point I've got this kind of cool effect. Let's just do one more thing. Let's add a very subtle drop shadow to our film strip, just a little bit, something like that. And the last thing I would do is take my text tool and pick a different typeface than this, because that would just be weird for like a wedding layout to have some big thick font. Would probably want something more like this, but again we have to make it much smaller. and lower the opacity. So now I have this nice little effect. I would save this as you see it as a PSD with all these smart objects in it. Now remember, let's review. This was my original smart object that I brought in, and then I made all these copies. I made a copy, scale it down, made all these copies. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 copies of the same thing. So at this point I save it. Now it's a month later, I'm doing another layout for another wedding, and I really like this layout. Instead of replicating and starting all over again, this is the cool smart object thing that's built in, is to take any one of these smart objects. I'm going to take this one just because you can see it most easily, but it's any one of these smart objects, right or control click and choose replace contents. Now it's going to ask me to find a file, so I'll go and find the one I want, which is this photo here. Now it's a camera raw file, so the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to go in and say, well, how do you want this to look? I make sure it's the same size. I adjust my exposure, whatever I want to do in camera raw, but the difference is now when I click OK, here's what's going to happen. Not only is it going to update that one, but it's going to replace all my camera raw files and look just like that. Now I simply have to edit the text and I'd have a whole new layout. All of them still copied, scaled, rotated, everything else all built in. So that's the other nice thing, and I didn't have to do anything different. I didn't have to choose an option that said save as a template. There isn't such a thing. The fact that you are using smart objects means by nature it is a template, and that applies for anything. For example, our type layer, if I convert that to a smart object and then apply some filter to it, whatever it might be. I'll just do texturizer again because we've seen that before. It's very easy to do. It's very subtle, of course, because my opacity was very low, but again, the point is, even as this as part of a template, now it's just a matter of double clicking. Here's my original type. I can first of all put up the opacity if I want, but I can also change whatever I want. In this case, I'm going to also make it just a little bit smaller so it fits into our size. Close it and save it, and that's going to update as well. So again, the benefit of using smart objects is that built into it is this idea of a template, and all you have to decide is, do you want to make multiple copies of the same file like I did in this case, or do you want to have some where you're doing new smart object via copy to make slightly different. Here's the only thing that you have to think about. So at this point I'm going to say, all right, let's do this again. Let's do replace contents, and I'm going to go and find a file that isn't the right size or orientation, like Corey Barker. When I placed that in, you see it just didn't work at all because it was a smaller file, the orientation was wrong. So make sure when you're doing this, you know how big the original was. Because I used Smart Object, it was easy because I could just pick one of the built-in Smart Object sizes. But you can do the same thing with PSDs and JPEGs. You just have to make sure that it's the same orientation and physical size, so when you do replace contents, everything works. But when it does, as you saw here, it works like a charm.